theyeshiva.net.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome. We're up to page Memtes. In this Maimon that we're learning via Daita Tofrish Nun Zayin, 1897, sorry. 5657, 1897. We're up to page Memtes, closer to the bottom of the page. The line starts, Roya kol prati hanimshal b'hamashal. Around 10 lines from the bottom, Roya kol prati hanimshal b'hamashal. So after explaining at length that every good communicator and teacher, in order to be effective, must restrict and curtail and limit the information and the wisdom and the inspiration and the depth to make it suitable and custom-made to the capacity, to the kalim of the recipient. And not only that, often the mashpia, the giver, the teacher, the communicator must enclose his ideas in a mashal, conveying a parable, a story, an illustration, an allegory, in order to allow the student or the child or the pupil, the disciple, to absorb the nimshal through the mashal. All of that, tzimtzum, all of this restriction and concealment discussed is only from the perspective of the recipient, because from the perspective of the giver, of the teacher, he sees within the mashal, he sees the nimshal, because for him the mashal is born out of the nimshal, where for the recipient the nimshal is born out of the mashal. It's a difference between seeing it from inside out or from outside in. So therefore the mashal never blocks, it never curtails, it never eclipses. There's no danger that from the mashal he's not going to get to the nimshal. The whole mashal was born from the nimshal. He's never going to get stuck by the mashal. He'll never see the mashal as just an external idea without any deeper reference, because often the Gemara will have mashal or medrash, mashal ha'adava doima. I'll give a metaphor and tell a story of a Melech Basav Adam in Medrash Rabbi, and all the Medrashim. This is very frequent, and also in Gemara quite a few places. Mashal ma'adava daima, a metaphor. Let's give a parable, and the story finishes, and then you have to go back to the nimshal. For the student, you hear a nice story. It could, the Machanayim books, they have nice children's stories. It was a good story. For the mashpia, on the other hand, that issue was never an issue, because the mashal grew out of the nimshal. It started from inside out. And therefore, he sees within the mashal the entire nimshal. There's l'chatchila no blockage. It's not like there's a tension, there's a paradox, there's a problem, and then he has to find it. He doesn't have to find it. The whole mashal was an outgrowth, a lavush for the nimshal in order to be able to communicate it. And this is what we spoke about in the last few shiurim. He gives the example that this is true. He says that this is true about everything in the world being a mashal for a nimshal, as he gives the example of earth, with all of its properties and all of its qualities and all of its characteristics, is essentially a mashal for what's called midas hamalchus. And this means that one who sees the mashal as a nimshal doesn't see it as detached, doesn't see it as separate, but rather sees the entire physical earth as a physical incarnation of a spiritual truth. And this is true about everything in the physical world. It's nothing but a physical incarnation of a spiritual truth. As he put it, the mashal and the nimshal are really one. Just one is expressed in a spiritual way and one is expressed in a physical way. They use different language, but the message is exactly the same message, which is the concept of a mashal and a nimshal. Yeah. In parentheses, v'zeu shemechadish koyach hagbola sheba mashpia, shaydei shemalbish sichle balavushim va'olamus hari ba'etzlo inyan ha'lekiba muchesh mamash. And this is the chiddush, this is the advantage of the power of the limitation that the mashpia has in order to dress up the idea in all of the garments and all of the concealments, helemus. So what happens is, it allows the godliness to assume a mukhshizdik experience, a very real experience, because as a result of connecting and aligning the mashal with the nimshal, you can experience it in a very tangible and real way when you appreciate that the physical world in all of its dimensions is essentially a mashal. Nimtza. Shalagabe hamashpia ein kan shum helam v'hester klal. Ki im lagabe hamakabalu helam v'hester. The result of this discussion is that lagabe, the teacher, there was no concealment, Only the mekabel, the student, for him this may constitute a concealment. What is the concealment? That he has access only to the external aspect of the idea. Its core and essential idea remains concealed, as explained. In order for the mekabel to be able to absorb it, he has to restrict and only give a ha'ara, a ray of the idea. If this Gon is teaching his children or any student, Gemara, Rashi, Tosfos, Mishnayos, Chumash, anything on his level, everybody will be confused and overwhelmed. So therefore, there is a real helam v'hester l'chayra for the mekabel, who only receives a certain fraction, a limited fraction and dimension of the ideas. For the teacher, who sees the full depth even in what he is communicating, there's no concealment. But the emes is, here we come to the next step. Gam l'gabe ha-mekabel ein ze'elam amiti. Even l'gabe the mekabel, it's a step, next step. Even l'gabe the mekabel, the student ein ze'elam amiti. It's not a real concealment. Sharei mikol makoim al yidei ze meiru mizgala le'gilui raseichel. For this is actually the vehicle through which he experiences the idea. If there was no tzimtzum, if the teacher would not restrict his flow and his depth and his length and his magnitude and the breadth and not eclipse it, so there would be no access, the mekabel wouldn't receive anything. He would just be overwhelmed and shut down. Kanal, as we said earlier, kaniskalel shima mashbiya yamagal lekolem chachmasa kamashu etzle hayumas balbalim chushav legamri. If the teacher would have unleashed the full current of his depth, of his wisdom, as it is within his own mind, so the chushim, the intellectual capacity, the cognitive ability of the student would just be confused completely. When people get confused, they give up, they shut down. It's only by restricting that you can actually give. It's only by holding back that you can actually reveal. It's only by concealing that you actually express. It's through the tzimtzum of the teacher that the student can absorb the light of the seichel, the light and the awareness that is being conveyed. This means you can't just say for the mekabel he's just receiving concealment. On the contrary, without the tzimtzum, he would get nothing. So for him, this is also a process of growth, of exploration, of revelation. Ube'emes,
better than nothing, really.
Right. So till now we would think it's better than nothing. What do you want? You're saying it's a hester. Don't say it's only a hester. It's also the only way he has access to it. But be'emes, the truth is, we're saying much deeper. The chiddush we're saying here is not just, it's not only a hester for the mekabel. It's also a gili. We're saying even more. Even the full depth of the seichel, which l'chayr is being concealed, which is why he could absorb it. Even this is ultimately being communicated to him. What does this mean? Shari Amr Razal, the Gemara says in Maseches Avodah Zarah Daf Hey, Loikoyim in a Shadaita de Rabbi Adar Boim Shnin, Avalachra Boim Shnin Koyim. Gemara brings in Avodah Zarah in the beginning of Masechet Avodah Zarah Daf Hey, Amar Rava. Moshe Rabbeinu tells the Jewish people at the end of Parshas Kisavoy, Loinosan Hashem lachem leiv ladas einayim lirois osnayim lishmoya ad hayoim hazeh. Hashem has not given you eyes to see, einayim lirois, osnayim lishmoya, and ears to hear, and a heart to discern, ad hayoim hazeh, till today. When is Moshe Rabbeinu speaking to the Jewish people? He's speaking a few weeks before his passing, meaning after they were 40 years together in the desert. So the Gemara says, you learn from here, like koyim inish adaita de rabbi adar boim shnit. A person cannot stand, adaita de rabbi, a person cannot appreciate, cannot master the das, the mind of his Rebbe, until after 40 years. Acher aboyim shnit koyim. That's why Moshe told them, we've been teaching for 40 years, but till ad hayoim hazeh, you didn't see, you didn't hear, you didn't understand. Leinosin Hashem lechem leiv liris enayim liris as leiv lahavin enayim liris as nayim l'shmoya ad hayoyim hazeh. 40 years, mucha tezich, 40 years, he's teaching day and night. Until 40 years. What's pshat? What does this mean? For 40 years he doesn't understand. The diuk of the Gemara is loikoyim inish adaita de Rabbi. Of course he can understand. If he doesn't understand anything, what type of Rebbe is it? And what type of Talmud is it? Moshe Rabbeinu is talking about himself, or even according to some of us, we're talking about Hashem. After 40 years, you finally get it. Some say the pshat in Gemara is about himself. They're teaching. He's teaching them. However, Yitaichad, he says, Pirush daita de Rabbi. Hainu pnimi is va'atzmi is kavanasa. Daita de Rebbe means you get it the way it's in your Rebbe's mind. Of course you got what he said. But what he said was the way he conveyed it through the restrictive channels that allowed you only to absorb that which your kalim were ready to absorb. In other words, it was completely limited and eclipsed based on your capacity. That's what a good teacher does. A good teacher has to invest equal time to what he's not going to say, at least as much to what he's going to say, maybe even more. They say that in Varsha, somebody once wanted to build built a yeshiva. It was called, I think, Teres Chaim. It was named after Reb Chaim Brisker, Reb Chaim Soloveitcher. So the Rosh Yeshiva became the son-in-law of Reb Chaim. His name was Reb Glicksman, Reb Hersh Glicksman. But they were first suggesting another Rosh Yeshiva. So they asked the Brisker of Reb Yitzchak Zev Halevi Soloveitcher, the Brisker of, the Reb Velvela Brisker, about a certain candidate who was a student of his father, Reb Chaim, and he thought that he wouldn't be a good idea. So they said, why? Weißt doch, was zu sagen. Brisk, that's a big compliment. He knows what to say. He says, yeah, but weiß nicht, was nicht zu sagen. He doesn't know what not to say. Okay. Not saying is as important as saying. Yeah. They once asked a great pianist, one pianist asked another world-renowned pianist what his skill is, why he was such a celebrity, why he's so world-renowned. He says, I read notes as well as you, I play like you. What's the difference between you and me? And he said, the pauses. It's the pauses that make the difference. Or as Rashi would put it, Litein revach ben parsha la parsha. It's the space, it's the pause between the parsha. So it's not just literally you have to pause. Obviously, when you speak you have to pause. When you play you have to pause. When you communicate you have to pause. It's deeper. The pause represents the koyach hahelim, the koyach hatzimtzum. It's a fascinating medrash Rabbi in Parshas Kisisa. It's a very interesting medrash. It says that when Moshe came down the second time from the mountain, so he had a tremendous light radiating from his face, right? Karan Urpnei Moshe, they couldn't even look at him. He had to put on a mask to be able to, they should be able to look at him. So the Medrash Rabbi asks, where did he get this light from? Where did he get the light from? The second time. So there's different interpretations. One of them is that Hashem, the Rebbeinu Shalom, dictated the Sefer Torah to him. And he was writing. Moshe was like a secretary. The Gemara says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu Omer or Moshe Kosev. The Gemara says, Hashem was dictating, so to speak, like you dictate to your secretary, Lahavdil. He was taking notes. He finishes writing the Sefer Torah, and then he says there was Diyosh and Eshtayir B'Kol Masay. There was the ink that remained in the quill. There was the ink remained in the pen. So Moshe rubbed that ink on his forehead, and from this came the Karnei HaHoid. Now the whole medrash is very strange, but the first question is, why was the ink left over in the Kol Masay, in the pen, in the quill? Hashem could have estimated how much ink would be needed. I understand, I put extra ink, I'm not sure how much I'm going to need. But he could have estimated, he certainly knew how much ink. So one of the explanations is, the Yosh and Eshtayir B'Kol Masay is, there's what is said, and there's what is not said. What is not said, in many ways, is much deeper than what is said. There's the ink that you hold back. There's the ink in the pen. The ink in the pen, that would be called Pnimiyas va'atzmiyas kavanaseh. Right. The pauses, the hefsek, the absence, is what allows the student to absorb. If the teacher gives everything the way it is in him, there's just a shutdown. There's no recognition of the individuality of the other. A student means you create a real person, a separate entity, somebody who's going to be able to grow and teach on his own. For this, you have to consider the identity of the person. You can't consider your own identity. Yeah. What happens after 40 years? After 40 years, he says, Daita de Rabbi. Rabbi says, Koyeminish Daita de Rabbi. He stands, so to speak. Koyem means he stands, he gets, he assumes. The das of his Rav, Hainu Pnimiyas Va'atzmiyas Kavanas. The atzmiyas, the core of what he was saying, the way it was inside of him, not only the way it could be experienced at that point from your vantage point. Ukamayim Razal, just like the Gemara says in Maseches Erevin, the beginning of Yud Gimel and Beis, the Gemara speaks about Reb Meir. So the Gemara says, Reb Achev, Reb Chanina said that Goli v'yadu, it's known that there was nobody in the generation of Reb Meir like Reb Meir. Why then is the halacha usually not like Reb Meir? And the debates between Reb Meir and his colleagues, for example, Reb Meir and Reb Yehuda have a lot of debates in Shas. The klal usually is halacha Reb Yehuda. There are a few exceptions, but generally the halacha was not like Reb Meir. In most of the debates between Reb Meir and his colleagues, the halacha was chosen by the Sanhedrin, by the Bezdin, by the majority, like the other one. So he says, everybody, Reb Acha, the Gemara says, everybody knows that there's nobody like Reb Meir. But Lama, he's quoting here the end of the Maimon Chazal. I'm just giving you the whole Maimon Chazal. Why didn't they establish the halacha like him? Because the Chachamim could not stand. Stand here means grasp, understand, appreciate. Soiv daite. What's that soiv daite? So that means the end of his das. What's the end of his das? The other side of it. There's the side of the das that comes to you. There's the other end that stays inside, the ink that stays in the pen. That which didn't come out with his galus. For the Rav, it was never concealed. For the student, it was concealed, because if it wouldn't have been concealed, if the whole ink would have been unleashed, there would be no parchment left, right?
It's not that he came into disfavor because of Acher.
No, not Acher, no. But the Gemara says, La yardu chacham lamed al soif daite. The Gemara gives an example. The Reb Meir, basically, if something was tameh, he can explain how it's tahir. If something is tahir, he can explain how it's tameh. So Rashi says they didn't know what's right, what's not right. In other words, they couldn't fully understand Reb Meir from his own perspective, and it was very confusing.
Did I get the Gemara wrong? Wasn't there a Gemara where Acher was going outside for Shabbos?
That, yeah. The Gemara says that he could do it. The Gemara says others distanced themselves from Acher, and Reb Meir could learn from Acher because toichay achal uklipasay zorak. He took out the pnimius and he discarded the shells, the husks.
Question. It sounds like there's a subtle point though here. It's a person who's kom adate de Rabbi v'sof arba mishnin, and he now gets it, and he gets the pnimius, but he doesn't get it because the Rebbe ever gave him the gilui. The Rebbe only gave him the hester. He's getting it through his work. Notice he's getting it.
You're right.
With his own accounts, whatever the word will be. Because he never got anything more directly than just the
okay, the Zog's good. Let's see. He's going to address this mamash. Upirish Rashi al etzem kavanasa. Rashi says, I don't remember. It says such. I don't think Rashi says this verbatim. Could be means the kavanah of Rashi. The etzem kavanah of Reb Meir. V'zeu dekoyim adaita de Rabbi hainu al etzem pnimiyus kavanasa. That's the meaning. After 40 years, you don't only understand what your Rebbe said. That could be before 40 years, hopefully. Koyeminish adaita de Rabbi, you really master the das of the Rav, the etzem, the pnimiyus of his chachma, of his kavanah, the core. The explanation in this is the hinin is boyer. We explained before. The Gemara says in a few places. Sugi, the beginning of Pesachim, Dav Gimel. You have to teach your child, but your student, b'derech tzara. Derech tzara means concisely, with brevity, without complex elaborations that confuse him. What does this mean? We explained. It doesn't just mean you give up a little vart. But derech tzara is a skill. It's a genius because mikol makam yesh b'zeh behelim kolayim chachmasa. A real mashpia within the brevity, within the concise words, he conveys in a concealed way the full depth. As the example given from Mishnah, where Mishnah is very brief, that's the function of Mishnah. The function of Mishnah is it should be able to be retained by almost anybody, because it was packaged in a way that is brief, concise, sharp. That's the tremendous value of learning and mastering Mishnayos. You know, Gemara, it never ends. It's complex and it's multi-layered. Mishnayos, you finish a Mishnah, you finish a Perek, you finish a Masechta. It's much more retainable. On the other hand, we know that there could be 5-10 blot Gemara or a whole blot Gemara with a lot of details analyzing every word in the Mishnah. Because Rabbi he compressed into the Mishnah the whole oimik of the Gemara. The Gemara is simply deducing, the Gemara is extracting from the Mishnah the oimik, the depth of the kavanah. What is being revealed to the recipient is an external ray, so to speak, of the wisdom. Where does he put in the concealed message, the full message? He puts it in be'inyan, meaning within the concepts that he's conveying, and sometimes it's diktukei tevis, it's how to put it, how it was phrased, the phraseology. You use this word, you use that word, you use this sentence, you use that sentence, like we see Taka Mishnayos. A real Makabel, we're talking about a real teacher and a real student. It's not so common. This Makabel, after he receives, in other words, there's full trust also. There has to be full trust. After he receives the hashpah, and it settles with him, hine, kshemedaktek achakach bo'inyonim v'dikduki atevis u'miyageyes atzmei bazeh, al pi ma shekibel b'his galus chuli, harei yubola oimik pnimiyus kavanosei v'etzem chachmasei, k'may shu etzel harav mamish, koidem shetzimtzim atzmei lashpiyah. Once the Makabel absorbs it, maybe on a superficial level, now he has that information to work with. As he matures, or as she matures and grows and develops emotionally, intellectually. We're talking here about any type of hashpah. It's not necessarily, it could be a shtikl Gemara, it could be a shtikl Tosfos, it could be a Rambam, it could be a Yin Halacha, or it could be in any tchum of life. Lahavdil also in Yanim Chachmas Chitzonius. And not even Chachma, also there's emotional communication, there's spiritual communication. But after he has this information, and he dissects and analyzes the idea, and he goes deeper into it, he himself will find layers and layers that were not accessible to him until he reaches it the way it was by the teacher. Before the tzimtzum of the teacher, furthermore, similarly, he could then also see the depth within all the mashalim that the teacher gave, the way it was by the teacher. The first thing is he has to understand the nimshal through the mashal. Dahainu shemiprati oimek hamashul hareyu boli prati oimek hanimshul bepnimis hakavana shemoy k'mayshulayim kivatachlis. From all the details and the depth of the mashul, he has to be able to extract and find what was the nimshul that was being conveyed, and finding the full depth of the nimshul, not just satisfying himself with a nice story, but really getting into the nimshul and mastering it. Oz then meir etzle prati hanimshul de hamashul. Once he reached that state, now there's no disparity anymore. There's no differentiation anymore. It's not two worlds. There's no mashal that blocks the nimshal and the nimshal that is hidden beneath the mashal. Once he reached the nimshal through the mashal initially, now he can go backwards. And now when he sees the mashal, he lechatchila sees the nimshal and the mashal. Using the mashalim that we were talking about before, how everything in the physical world, its dimensions and properties and characteristics and sizes and even ratio, and there's no detail in the earth that is not a mashal for Elikos, right? But when we see the world, we just see the mashal, we don't see the nimshal as explained in previous shurim, with Hashirim and Yosef and Yaakov and the various mashalim that we gave. Anything you look at, it's snowing outside today, right? We look at it, a person senses that it's a mashal. A person senses that children love snow. You sense there's a certain energy being conveyed in the world. But what we see is snow. If you bother and you spend time learning how snow emerges, so then you see the snow and you see within it an extra layer of wisdom. In other words, you see the background of the snow. So when you'll hear the weather, they'll broadcast the weather, one person will just say, this is the weather. A meteorologist might explain to you the various physical forces. The winds are coming from here, and the clouds are developing here, and the storm is started here. So now you have more background, so you could see it on a deeper layer. If you have a scientist, he can explain to you the underlying forces that generate this type of weather. And the true expert will explain to you exactly how the ice crystals and the rain droplets form in the clouds as a result of earth heating up and unleashing the vapor that comes from our crust and forming into clouds which can carry, each cloud can carry the weight of water, the weight of 400 elephants. Each cloud can carry the weight of 400 elephants. You knew that? So now you know. 400 elephants, the vase, what this is. I don't mean baby elephants. Each cloud, 400 elephants, and then at some points it plots. And either we enjoy a good rain or we enjoy a beautiful bedecked snow. And you go deeper and deeper into the science of it and physics of it. And why is it white? And when does it happen? And what's exactly the weather? And never mind the snow shapes. But what happens if somebody from the world of Yitzira was broadcasting the weather? He would talk about the same snow, but suddenly it would be the Nimshal, not the Mashal. And somebody from Bria and somebody from Atzilus, it would also be the same weather. It's all the same weather. It's the same reality. Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. There's no hundreds and thousands and billions and trillions and sextillions of realities. It's all one reality. The question is, which layer of it do you perceive? From the perspective of the Nimshal, every flake of snow is the same flake, with the same shape. But it's an outer crust of an inner story, of an inner energy. And then the world becomes one. It's completely cohesive. It's completely integrated. But I begin with the mashal as a student, as a recipient. I begin with the mashal, and then from the mashal I can get to the nimshal. But then when I get to the nimshal, if I really master the nimshal, at some point koyim inish adaita de Rabbi. Then when I look at the mashal, I don't see anything separate. I see it lechatchila as an outgrowth of the nimshal. And what the great advantage is that it's bemuchash. Elikus is then something that's very real, because one can see in the physical world the manifestation of the spiritual divine energy. V'nimtze sha'oz mishtave ha'makabel el ha'mashpia. At that moment there is equality, there is hishtavus, there is unity between the teacher and the student. They become one. Gambi yediyas v'asagas pnimiyas hakavana. It's not anymore, I'm the giver, you're the taker. I'm on top, you're on bottom. It had to be that way because the mashpia was bringing up the makabel. But the real objective of the teacher is not to have students. The real great teachers don't want students. They want to create new teachers. They say great leaders don't want followers. Great leaders want to create leaders. But for this, you have to be able to give the follower everything. If you say, no, there's some information, it's copyright. Because if I spill the beans, then what's going to be left of me? What's going to be left? That's not a real mashpia. That's somebody with his own agendas. He's not into mashpia. He's into protecting his own maisalach. The real mashpia, the real leader, he wants to spill all the beans. Fakert. The reason he didn't spill all the beans in the beginning is so that the student should be able to get all the beans. If he would have spilled all the beans, he would have been left with no beans. I'm not talking about shalom beans. But the fact that he didn't spill it out, he didn't give it out, there was diyosh and shtayr. There's the ink that remained. The ink that remained, because of that, he has access to it, and he can ultimately receive everything. This is the moment of hishtavos. Hishtavos. Gambi yediyas v'asagas pnimiyas hakavana. You see it in the moment of Parshas Ba'aloischa. It's one of the most. It's a very extraordinary, dramatic moment in Chumash where two Nevi'im start prophesying with unauthorized prophets, Eldad and Medad, start prophesying outside of the 70 elders who Moshe Rabbeinu initiated as Nevi'im. So Yehoshua runs over to Moshe and he says, Adoini Moshe Kloyim. Moshe, my master, you should incarcerate them. Kloyim, you should put them in a keller. You should put them in prison. Why? Because they are essentially, as they say in Yiddish, they machen Shabbos fazich. They're establishing a rabbeistve. They're becoming their own people. They became prophets on their own. This is very dangerous to your authority. So Kloyim actually says two interpretations. One is put them in prison. Another interpretation, which applies timelessly, is Hatel aleim tzarchet tzibur vehem kolim aleim. Make them community leaders. And that's it. Once you become a community leader, they'll just perish on their own. It's good. Just give them cover, just elevate them a little bit, make them responsible for the kehillah, and then within 6 months they're done. Everybody hates them. There's pashkvilin against them. They're the worst Jews who ever lived in the history of humanity, because they had the poor fortune to become leaders. That's what Rashi says. I didn't make it up. It means the problems existed even in Germany in the 11th century. Hatel of France. So what does Moshe tell Yeshua? He tells him these words. Hamekane atali miyitein kol am Hashem neviim ki yitein Hashem es ruchay aleim. Are you being jealous for me? Let me tell you about me. My wish is that the entire nation of God would be prophets, that Hashem confers His Spirit on every one of them. Do you think I get worried when there are 2 prophets? I would like all 4 million Jews to be prophets. That's my agenda. That's where you see the genuine mashpia. My objective is every Jew would be a prophet. God would confer Spirit. So at this moment, the mashpia and the makabel become one in the sense that he can also grasp the pnimius hakavana. Ella, there's still a difference. Eitzel hamashpia b'bchinas or yashar. We're now going to come to discover 2 terms, or yashar and or chayzer. Or yashar alavav yud or alavav ches. These are well-known terms in the literature of pnimius HaTorah. The writings of the Arizal, the writings of the Balatanya, the writings of all Sifrei Kabbalah, the Sifrei Hagra, most Sifrei Pnimis HaTorah, they have this expression from the Arizal, Or Yashar, Or Chayzer. Or Yashar, Shal Mashpiyah, B'chinas Or Yashar. By the Mashpiyah, it's direct light. What do we mean? The Mashpiyah starts from inside out. He starts with the Nimshal, and then he dresses it up in the Mashal. And that's how he gets to see godliness in a very realistic and real way by dressing it up in the mashal. By the makabel, it's what's called rebounding light, light that rebounds. The rebound light, the that returns, so to speak. He begins with the outside, and from there he goes to the pnimius. Yashar is the that comes from inside out, and chayzer is the that returns. It's the rebound it's the returning light. From the mata, he comes back to the maila, rather than from the maila going to the mata. So it's a different process completely. From the mashpiyah, he goes from the ruchni to the gashmi, from heaven to earth, from soul to body, from inner to outer, from the divine. He brings it into the lower, to the physical, and for the Talmud, for the Makabal, it's the other way around. It's Or Chayzer, he starts off with the outer, and from there he makes a journey to the inner, and each one has its advantages.
Reflected light is not a good...
Reflected light, okay.
Rebound sounds more like it retains all its problems. Reflected is a little bit different.
It's the earth. It's the that's chayzer. It's the that's chayzer. There's the ray of the light of the sun that hits earth, right? And then there's how it bounces off earth. In the world of sports, everybody knows when you play tennis or you play these other games, there's the initial force that unleashes the ball, right? But that doesn't create the real dynamic of the game. What creates the real dynamic of the game is the rebound. The rebound is what happens when the ball hits the resistance, right? It hits the wall and it comes back, and that unleashes a whole new type of energy that you couldn't have foreseen in the beginning. Yeah. Talking about mashal and nimshal, this is a mashal. Now don't get stuck in the mashal. Don't get stuck in the mashal of tennis. Come back to the nimshal. The truth is all of tennis is a mashal for all sports, it's a mashal for nimshal. The whole guf is a mashal for nimshal.
When I look at reflection, is that it's a little bit different when it comes back, because it's changed by what it hits. But rebound sounds like it's the same, but less.
But that's what I gave you the marshal, that rebound is not the same. Ad kedei kach, that the Yoidei Dover argue what is more important, the initial hit or the rebound.
But the rebound could be a drop shot too, right?
In a chanami.
You suck all the energy out of the shot.
In a chanami, that's true.
So is
That's a good marshal. Sometimes.
Is that a threat to the Rabbi when the Talmud does that?
Of course.
How does the Rabbi handle that? But he's got a rebound.
Right. And sometimes a person doesn't do it. Sometimes you can detach the nimshal from the marshal completely. Basically, the idea here about this whole mime is it's about sensitization versus desensitization. The ability to be able to look at the world, to be able to look at your life, to be able to look at your body, to be able to look at your physical organism, to be able to look at your brain, to be able to look at every aspect of your life, even its most material and corporal reality, and sensitize yourself to the inner energy of it, to be able to see the world, the universe, beginning with the inner universe, as a mashal for a nimshal. We don't start with our yasher, we go with our chayzer, the light that comes back, that ascends. It ascends milmata l'mayla versus milmayla l'mata. Umikol zayuvan, from all of this we can understand Eich shekoyach hagbola v'hester shalamashpiyah. Masha mitzamtzim amaylam sichle b'derech tzara b'mishalem v'kadoyma. This all explains to us that the entire process that we're speaking about, the capacity of limitation of the giver to conceal the seichel in brevity u'b'mishalem. He keeps on saying two things. There's derech tzara and there's mishalem. It's two separate things. Derech tzara just means it's a simplified version of the idea. When you're teaching Mishnayos or Chumash to a 6-year-old, it's not like you're teaching it to a 30-year-old who's baki in Tanakh and maybe in Shas and Poskim and in many Mefarshim. It's a different limud, even though it's true. You're teaching the 6-year-old the truth of Chumash, but you're just giving the simplified version. Derech Tzara means a person, he can have a Rosh Hashiva, it's a huge gon. He's communicating a message the way that the student will be able to understand. If he would unleash everything he's thinking right now about this sugya, nobody would know what hit him. That's Derech Tzara. But he's still talking the information itself. The Hester is in quantity and quality, but you didn't transport it to another realm. A mashal means you completely change the subject. Now we're going to tell a story. In the Derech Tzara, you see there's an idea, you just don't know the full depth of the idea. The mashal is a transportation into another idea. And this duality is very important, because when we're going to talk about the nimshal of all of this, the nimshal, you have both elements. You have God conveying his energy b'derech tzara, then you have God conveying his energy as a mashal. The difference is the higher worlds are all derech tzara. It's a restriction of an intense infinity that's limited. But one could still sense that it's an idea. You're sitting at a Shia Gemara. Nobody thinks they're not sitting at a Shia Gemara. I'm just not getting the full depth of the sugya. Fine, now I have to wait 40 years. A mashal, you could completely lose perspective. Right? Oh, it was a good word. It was a good joke. It was a good story today. That's it. There's nothing more than that. That would be this world. Our world is not just derech tzara. Our world is also a mashal. Where the mashal, like you said before, you could detach. I'm just emphasizing, that's why you'll see a whole time he gives two details. There's derech tzara and there's mashallah. V'kadoyme, ein ze hester amiti klal. Now we understand it's not a real hester. Why? She'ein master be'emes klal. Not only for him, not even for the mekabel. She'amekabel adei ashpa kol emek p'nemis kavanas hara. A real mashpia put it all in there. Im kain ein ze hester. So it's not a concealment. The whole mimer was saying it is a concealment, and that's why he has to do it in order to conceal it. And if it wouldn't be a concealment, it wouldn't work. That's true. That's why he says, Eine master be'emes. We know that there's a hester here, but in the ultimate scheme of things, in the truth, it's not a hester. Why? Why is it not? You have to look at it differently. The real effect of the hester is there should be gilui. It's not to conceal, it's to reveal. I'm not looking to conceal, I'm looking to give. The hester is a hechitimtze in the gilui. The hester is a din in the gilui. Sometimes people give, and the giving is a din in hester. And sometimes the hester is a din in gilui. In other words, are you looking for hester, you're looking for gilui. Sometimes you're looking for hester nebach, you have to be megala a little bit, so you're megala. Sometimes fakert, all you're looking is for gilui. In order for there to be able to be Gilu, you need the Hester. In other words, the Hester is a hechitimtza of the Gilu. It's a din in the Gilu. It's a method of Gilu. But Mela, don't even look at it as Hester. The whole union of Hester is Gilu on two levels. The Hester right now allows him to get what he could get, and it allows him later to get everything through the Hester. What would be the alternative? Giving everything. His chushim would be confused. He would get nothing. Certainly he wouldn't get the ultimate truth, he would get nothing. Right now, at least he gets a tremendous amount. Plus, you gave him something that if he holds on to it and works with it, he'll be able to reach the Oimek Pnimis HaKavan of the Rav. V'nimtza, what's the summation of all of this? Sha'hester shalamashpiya einoi hester amiti kla. When we speak about the concealment of the mashpiya, even though it's true, but it's not a hester amiti kla. It's true, meaning it does conceal, but that's not called a hester for real. Adarabba, kol inyonei hu legalos. It's essentially only a process of revelation. For the process of revelation to be achieved, it must go through this restriction, this concealment, simply to reveal. So it's Adirabba. If he wouldn't be master, he would be master. If he would be Megala, that would be the Hester. Because he wants to be Megala, that's why he's being master. If he would have wanted to conceal, then he would have revealed. He wants to reveal. That's why he's concealing.
So it's more than Gilu L'Shem Hester.
Atazai.
It's not really Gilu Hester. It's Gilu which
yes.
Which is Gilu.
Yes. Or to put it differently, once again, it's the difference of how the teacher sees it and how the student sees it. I may see it as Hester, but that's just a mashal. What is the Hester from the teacher's perspective? Kulai Gilui. It's just a process. If I would see it as the full revelation, it wouldn't do its work. So it has to be concealed, so I should be able to receive it. But from the teacher's perspective, is there any concealment here? No. The whole concealment is only for the purpose of revelation, and the concealment itself is revelation. That's its whole entity, that's its whole identity. Now, when we could translate this into life, this can create a paradigm shift. It becomes a game changer. And our person sees all of the concealments in his life. Because every life is filled with concealments. Every life is filled with blockages. Blockages of things that are not flowing. There's two stories here. There's the story the way it is from the outside in, and there's the story the way it is from the inside out. And from the inside out, it's not a Hester. It's in order for the Gilui to be able to be absorbed within the person, as we'll see. So therefore, V'hainu mashemevi oira seichel shel hamashpia gam pnimiyas v'atzmiyas chachmasei l'mokim nomuch harbe shegam sham yoreh v'yizgal oira mashpia. His objective is that the deepest seichel of the mashpia should come down into a much lower place. It's easy not to give. He could keep it within himself, but he wants to bring it down to a lower place. V'hainu ma'amakabel katan she'ene berech hamashpia. This is ultimately driven by love. He wants to bring it to the person who's in a different world. Gam hu yavin v'yasegayra mashpia. He should also comprehend it. Gam oimek pnimis hatzmis chachmasei. He doesn't want him to get the superficial stuff. He wants him to get all of it. And b'meila, if so, the whole Hester is really another word for Gilui. For the Gilui to happen, it goes through Hester. Hester is simply the external form that carries within it all of the revelation of the mashpia to the Mekabel. This is all the mashal. We'll get to the Nimshal Eretz Hashem tomorrow.
These words here just to me unbelievable when you say the light change. It answers something that bothers me and probably many others every day. Etzem chachmas no selam hashpia hayra. Etzem chachmas no selam hashpia behelim v'inyanim v'dikdukei hatevos. Those words. So now I understood something that always bothered me. We're learning Gemara. The word turns the Mishnah upside down. I never saw those words. The Mishnah never said that. Where did you come to say that the Mishnah means it was some crazy case? It's not the words. But the point is, the words are packaged a certain way with that Helen. And after 40 years, an Amora can figure out that this is what Rabbi Yehuda Anasi had in mind when he, with his Dukei Tables to say that this is the real thing. The Mishnah gave you the mushal with that specific answer with those Dukei Tables. That's much. Otherwise, how do you explain to a kid? Well, you can't give him kids. What do you mean Chuzrim is Hakitani? You tell me stuff that's not there altogether.
Yeah. In other words, the Gemara is not imposing like people think. The Gemara manipulates the Mishnah so that it should make sense according to the Amirayim. Just like the Chazal did to Chumash. You can go back to Teresh B'Ksav. What do they do to a Pasuk Chumash? What they do to a Pasuk Chumash? with all the Yud Gimel Midas, Gzeir Shavis, Emeinin, Lekant, Neyukana. It's all the same Nakuda. You're not manipulating the text.
It's coming to its previous.
You're extracting, you're unleashing the full energy, the full idea that was contained in it. And it had to be contained and compressed and concealed. Because if the Mishnah would have become the Gemara, it would lose its purpose. The whole idea of the Mishnah was Derech Tzara.
That's mamish.
Yeah. Yeah. Chisurim Mechsur V'Achiktan.
Put that as a comment.
Someone cut your passport.
So garments.
This class is brought to you by theyeshiva.net. Please help us continue the classes. Make even a small contribution at www.theyeshiva.net/donate.